All right, and let's get started here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Entrepreneurs International Network. My name is Robert Evans. I'm co-founder of a technology company called Actionera, which Entrepreneur EIN, as we call it, Entrepreneurs International Network, is one of the companies under the umbrella of Actionera. I usually come on here each week to introduce all of you entrepreneurs from all over the place to leaders that we know, that we respect, that we work with and collaborate with, that have really powerful and important messages that are valuable to any entrepreneur, no matter what kind of business that you're running, especially if you're running anything online. And we have one of our, not only just a leader that we know, but a really good friend of ours in life and in the industry here with us here today. And I'm very excited to talk with Sam and get into his area, one of his many areas of expertise. I'll just say this. I mean, so I'm gonna read his bio here, and believe me, this is like 10% of what Sam does and is up to. Sam Liebowitz is a facilitator, mentor, speaker, healer, serial entrepreneur, and four-time best-selling author. He is also the owner of TalkRadio.nyc, a media outlet that gives voice to alternative ideas, and Double Diamond Wellness, a wellness center in Manhattan. So, like I said, that's only a piece of what Sam does. Now, that's the official bio. My personal bio is this. Sam is very good friends with Iman, who started EIN a number of years ago. Sam has become a really good friend of mine, I would like to say, because we've spent some time here recently at some events. This man is incredible in his knowledge and generosity of really helping people transform their lives and transform their businesses. And I've had the pleasure of really getting an understanding of what he does with Talk Radio .nyc, and how he helps thought leaders and transformational leaders get their message out there on a much wider scale, reach more people, and that sort of thing. And it's a very, very impressive model and way that he goes about doing that. So we invited Sam here today to talk with us about how you can get your voice heard, especially through podcast, and to kind of maybe bust some of the myths out there about podcasts and just kind of dive into different things. So let me bring Sam on now. Sam, thank you, bud, for being here. It's always
Oh,
good to see you.
thanks so much, Robert. It's so good to see you. It's been a minute, and it's a real pleasure to come and have a chance to share my experience with the group.
All right. So now, like I said, you're a man that wears many hats,
Yep.
from being very involved in Evolutionary Business Council to, the wellness work and the other things that you're involved in. But one of your real signature things is really helping entrepreneurs leverage podcasts. Tell
Mhm.
me what you think is important for people start. Let's just kind of start off with starting out with a podcast is people really want to get started and get recognized as a leader of some sort, whether it's in the transformational field or somewhere else. What are some of the kind of key things that you think are important for people starting out to start thinking about so they learn less the hard way and they can,
Yeah.
by listening to you, for example.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, most people think that, to have a successful podcast, you either need a lot of money, a lot of time, a ton of knowledge, great marketing, great distribution, great guests, all this stuff. And the truth is, you actually don't need any of that. The most important thing that I've learned over my almost 15 years of working in the industry, the most important thing is consistency.
Hmm.
And I've seen it myself personally over the years that I've been running the network, but then I did actually some research about it, and I was looking at this was back probably 7 years ago, back in 2018, 2019, I was looking at it. And at the time, less than 19% of existing podcasts had come out with a new episode across a 3 month period of time. Less than 19%, less than a fifth of the episodes. And so I was updating my little talk, and I always look for, well, okay, what are the latest statistics? And it blew me away because in 2024, I thought that number, would go like way down, but it was only 17%, actually way up, I should say, that more people would have had more episodes coming out, but it was just over 17% of podcasts in 2024 were active, actually came out with a new episode. And of the ones who come out with new episodes, of the podcasts published ever, like, I don't know, it's some crazy number, like 70 to 80% have less than 8 episodes.
Mm,
Less than 8 episodes. And it really kind of blows my mind because you go through all this time and effort to set things up, to figure out what your brand is, coming up with the name, figuring all the technology, and you come out with 8 episodes, nobody's going to find that. And so I've seen it over and over again. Consistency is the most important aspect. It's like, if you're going to do it and stick with it. It doesn't always have to be the same. It doesn't always have to look the same. If you need to change the name in the middle, you want to change the brand around, okay, but stick with it, because otherwise all the time and effort that you've put into getting things going is kind of wasted.
yeah.
And
Well,
and I just want to say, the people who
yeah.
I've worked with the most consistently over the longest period of time always achieve the most success.
Great. That's the question I have. What do most podcasters consider to be success? What's that? What does success look like in the podcasting world?
Well,
Is it an individual thing, or
it
or are there some metrics there?
it's very individual. I mean, yeah, there are those who they want their whole business to be the podcast, and so it's all about monetization and getting a huge YouTube channel and having, hundreds of thousands, millions of subscribers. But that's only one kind of success. There are dozens and dozens of different kinds of success that you could have with a podcast. One example I always like to refer to, because it's just such a good example of a different way to approach having a podcast, is this gentleman, Michael, who I knew, who did a show with me. And when I met Michael, I knew him as a web designer and an SEO guy. And he came up to me after this business networking meeting. And he said, Sam, I want to do a show with you. And I'm like, great, Michael, what do you want to do a show about? Technology? And he's like, no, 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 that's just my day business. He goes, my real passion is comic book art. And 14 years ago, before I was married and had kids, I used to work in the industry for Wizard Magazine, which, if anyone knows comic books, Wizard Magazine was like the magazine. And he said, I used to know all these people in the comic book industry, but now, when I got married and had kids, I had to make real money. So I started doing technology, but I really love comic book art, and I still do it, but it's like tiny. It's like 5%, 10% of my income every year. It's nothing. I really want to build up my comic book art. And now, with all the Marvel movies and DC movies and TV shows and all this stuff coming up, I feel like there's a real opportunity. So I'm great. So he started doing a show called Secrets of the Sire, which was the name of his comic book. And what he was doing is he wanted to reinvigorate all of his contacts in the comic book industry. So he brought on producers, artists from different, magazines, different companies. And eventually what happened is he started to get well known. He did all the right things. We worked together for a few years, and he started getting known in the comic book industry as someone to listen to. And then he started being able to pitch some of his ideas to these production companies. And he actually started getting more and more comic book work, until something very interesting happened. About 3 years after we started working together, an entertainment company approached him and bought his podcast from him. So they
Mm,
paid him some money, And then they changed the name of the podcast. He started doing it with them, and they paid him to do the podcast every week, and he helped to promote their properties. And so he stopped working with me at that time. And then I didn't see him for a couple of years. And then I talked to him, and I bumped into him and said, "Hey, Michael, how things going?" He goes, "Sam, you won't believe it. More than 50% of my income now is coming from my comic book work instead of from my technology work," which is exactly what his goal was. But then a few years later, like last year, probably about, I don't know, a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, I don't go on Facebook much anymore, but I just happened this one day being on Facebook, and I saw a post from him. He had just been named creative director of the company that had bought his podcast.
Nice.
Total inconsequential, was not ever a goal of his, but now he's in this leadership role in an entertainment company. So that's the, I wanted to say, that's the kind of unexpected benefits you can have from doing a show. Now, I mean, did he get decent listenership on the show? Yeah, it was decent, but decent in the comic book industry, which isn't really a huge industry like some other industries. But he always kept his audience in mind, and so he did a fun show, talked about, what was going on in the industry, what movies were coming out, what TV shows, what was going on, and made it entertaining. And so, what kinds of success can you have? You have all
Yeah.
kinds of different successes.
So it could be all over the place. To be from, hey, this is just something I'm passionate about, and they do it just out of the pure enjoyment of it, which sounds like what he was looking for, to building credibility for yourself in an industry and getting a name recognition through
And
the people that you interview and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
and to that point, myself, I had started doing my show when I took over the network almost 15 years ago. And in 2016, I had an opportunity to apply to be a TEDx speaker in TEDx Upper West Side. And I do public speaking, but at the time I hadn't been that active with public speaking. And so when my friend introduced me to the organizer, he's like, "Okay, send me your speaker's reel." And I'm like, I don't have a speaker's reel right now, but I could send you some episodes of my radio show that I've done that you could see how I'm do." And he's like, "Okay, great." I sent him like 5 of my best episodes. He watched the videos, he listened to them. He's like, "Oh, this is great. We would love to have you as a featured speaker." And so I was the only featured speaker in that TEDx that didn't have a speaker's reel,
Hmm.
purely
Because you
because of my show.
because of your show. Yeah, that's interesting. So So let's say someone is really kind of wanting to be, seen or positioned in the industry that they're in. What are some of the things that they could do with their podcast to make that more likely to happen? Um,
Ah,
is there specific strategies, people that they should invite? Should they do interview style? Should they do
yeah,
talking
yeah,
head style? What do you suggest?
yeah. So, um, the number one thing is to always keep your audience in mind. Is what you're talking about something that educates your audience, is something they're interested in, is something that will keep their attention? Because I cannot tell you how many podcasts I've listened to that are like two people talking back and forth about totally irrelevant stuff that has nothing to do with anybody, and nobody would care about it except their mother if they were listening. Um, but if you really want to do it right, one gentleman who I worked with, Tony Martinetti, he did a show for small and mid-sized nonprofits. And he was a nonprofit consultant. And what he saw was in the industry that the large nonprofits had access to all this information and consultants and everything that the small and mid-sized nonprofits didn't have a budget for. And so he did a show specifically for that niche. So a very well-defined niche. And he invited on all the great nonprofit thought leaders in it. I mean, he's had Seth Godin, Craig Newmark, um, Peter. what was his name? He used to be head of the 92nd Street Y. He started Help a Reporter Out. I can't remember his last name now. But he had all these great thought leaders on. And you would think, well, who is he? He's some little nonprofit guy. What does he know? One of the things that's great is if you actually take the time to reach out to people who have a following, who are well known in the industry you want to get known in, not all the time, but majority of the time, they're going to say sure, and they'll come on your show. So what ended up happening is Tony became known as a thought leader in the nonprofit space because of all the great guests he brought on. And not only that, but he got named as a thought leader in some of these nonprofit industry blogs. And one of them even said, and if you like our top 10 list, the other nine people have all been guests on Tony's show. He ended up becoming the
That's great.
number one nonprofit podcast. Not
Mhm.
only that, he had more than double the number of subscribers of the number two nonprofit podcast. He had, because there were people who wanted to reach his market, he had at his peak of his show at five different sponsors. So, I mean, and the interesting thing was he only did two things for nonprofits. He did charity registration and he did planned giving, but he would talk about all kinds of different topics, and he would have on these reoccurring guests who were experts in some particular area, like prospect research or board governance, the legal aspects, technology, whatever. And so what would happen is he'd eventually start getting these phone calls of like, "Hey, Tony, I need a marketing plan for my nonprofit. Can you do that?" And he'd be like, "No, sorry, I don't do marketing plans, but I can refer you to someone who does." "Hey, Tony, I need a social media outreach plan. Can you do that?" "No, sorry, I don't do that." "Hey, Tony, I need someone to help me with my board. Can you do it?" "No, I don't do that." But he had this group of professionals who were regular recurring guests who became a real team of his. And so he started referring out all this work that came to him because of his show. And because he was sending all these referrals to them, they were sending referrals back to him as well. And so his business really took off. You're muted, Robert.
True, true collaboration there, because that's a gold nugget strategy right there. That's and I'm gonna repeat it just in my own head because I'm thinking about this for a couple projects that I have. Let's say you're just this person that has this passion for something. And so your friend had a passion for helping nonprofits that struggle. He didn't have a name for himself in the industry, but what he did do, which is very which not that many people do because they're afraid to do this or they think they can't do this. But what he did do is he reached out, no matter what, to these leaders, these names in that world, invited them to be on his podcast. Probably a lot of them said yes, because the truth is, even the biggest leaders want to be on podcasts. They want to have that's exposure for them, right? It's
Right.
not just that they're doing a favor for you. They're actually first and foremost doing something for themselves, which is putting themselves in front of more people. So you're going to get a lot more yeses than what you would think you would get. And got them to say yes, started to interview them. And then I'm going to throw in the word that you use, got consistent at doing that, started putting out more than 8 episodes, for example. And all of a sudden now he's seen as an authority in that industry. That's brilliant to start from like nothing, no name to
Yeah.
the authority and name in the industry through a podcast. That's a magical recipe that you just spelled out there for sure.
And you don't even have to have that lofty a goal. Like it's not, you don't even have to have the goal of like, I want to be a real thought leader in my industry. It can just be, I want to create better connections and good referral partners who can send me work and I can send them work. I remember I talked to a gentleman early on when I was running the network in the early days, when I told him what I was doing and everything. He goes, "Oh yeah, like I knew this guy who was a lawyer in the San Francisco Bay Area." And he did absolutely no marketing except he did a podcast. And what he did is he would invite all the different business leaders from all the different businesses in his town onto his podcast to talk about their business and their struggles and this and that. And because he gave them a platform and gave them this opportunity for them to talk about what they do, they all liked him before it. Not only did they use him as a lawyer, they would refer people to him as a lawyer. And so he's practicing in like a year, guy told me he went from just being a solo practitioner to having four, um, what do you call, partners, four legal partners. And that like his business was doing booming from it. So sometimes it's more about being strategic with who you're inviting onto your show as a way of just getting the foot in the door so that you're basically just offering them something for nothing in return. They kind of get to like you because of that. And then you follow up with them afterwards and say, hey, it was great having you on the show. I loved what you're about. Maybe there's a way for us to work together. And then you can build partnerships and relationships that can really feed your business in a way that if you just reach out to someone, they're like, who are you? I don't have time for you. But this way, it's like, hey, you're
Yeah.
offering something. As my friend Cynthia would say, you're making a deposit in the bank account so that then when you want to ask something of them, they're much more willing to give you something.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll tell you why I love that. The one podcast that I'm definitely about to start is a podcast here in this small southern city that I live in Southern Oregon, called Ashland, Oregon. And Ashland is, it's a beautiful mountain town, about 20,000, people here. But it's a tourist town and it's got the Shakespeare Festival and all that sort of thing. I am launching a mobile app here, which is the primary
Oh.
thing I have that I want to bring into this area. It's called Ashland Local. And it's all
Mhm.
about, it's an app in which it's going to feature the businesses here in the city and surrounding cities and what their knowledge is and what they have to offer. Now, the way I'm going to develop the relationship, because, and I'm doing this because of you, Sam, because we've talked
Mhm.
about this before. I've heard you, tell me this strategy before, is I'm doing a podcast called Ashland Local Podcast. And I'm literally just going to go out there and start inviting business leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs to jump on this call, this, podcast with me. Maybe coming into my office and we'll do a video version of it and just to do, get people to get to know them, right? That sort of thing. So I developed that relationship. So I'm doing the podcast not because I want to be, known in the, the area, or I'm going to make a lot of money off of sponsors. I'm doing it because it's an opportunity for me to build relationships with these businesses that will then want to be in my app, and that's how I monetize things. So we talk about the strategy of someone really going from, hey, I'm here now, not known, to being known, to using a podcast to develop business relationships, to your friend in the comic book world doing a podcast because that was just his passion. And organically, it just happened to turn into something else, not really part of his plan or his strategy. So podcasts really could go any particular direction. And like you said, success can show up in 10, 15 different ways.
Right, right. And it's as long as you keep showing up, as long as you keep doing it, the possibilities are endless. You just never know. I mean, when I started doing my own show, I never thought it would lead to me having a TED Talk, and I've had some pretty interesting people on my show. I had on Dr. Raymond Moody, who's very famous for writing the book Life After Life. He's like a reincarnation specialist. Lynn McTaggart, who a lot of people know, was on my show. I've had on a number of big names, and did I get it day one? No, but eventually just the connections happened and people said, oh, let me introduce you to so and so, and they would come on.
I love it. I love it. So two of Okay, so here's the key. You say the key is consistency, right? And the
Mhm.
stats clearly show that most podcasts start and really don't go anywhere, or most podcasts don't have, more than 8 episodes, which obviously that's not consistency. Consistency is
Right.
probably years of, of doing it
Right.
on a regular basis. So here's a question I have for you, because I know there's one side of the podcasting world that that you do, and that is you help people launch, market, manage their podcast so they can stay focused on their content. But
Right.
obviously, someone could go out there and just go to YouTube and say, how do you start a podcast? And they can do it themselves, right? But
Right.
what's really the difference between in consistency and potential success between trying to do it yourself and trying to and or not and working with someone that does that for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a big result difference, and
Yeah,
why?
there's usually a big difference because let's face it, we're human beings, right? If we're paying somebody for a service, we're going to make sure we show up every week and do it. I have a gentleman who's working with me now. His name's Tommy. He's also in the nonprofit space. I've known Tommy for many, many years. And he said, Sam, I've been talking about doing a podcast. At the time he came on board with me, he said, I've been talking about doing a podcast for the last 3 years. And I think I've done all of like 9 short videos on YouTube, and that's it in 3 years. He's now been with me. He's almost out at his 200th episode this month.
Wow.
Let's face it, if we don't have someone else holding us accountable and helping us, other things are going to get in the way. Business gets in the way. We get to, stuff happens. But the other thing too is we really got to decide like how much is our time worth? It's yeah, can you figure out all this things and how to get the music in and how to do this and promote it and get it up there and what kind of thumbnails to have? Can you figure that all out yourself? Yeah, if you're an intelligent human being with the internet now, you could pretty much figure out anything. But how much time are you going to spend figuring everything out and then doing stuff on a regular basis, as opposed to just focusing on the most important part for yourself, which is the content and the guests? And that's why working with a station like mine or working with a podcast producer where they handle all that little nonsense, all the tedious stuff, so that you can just really focus on the important stuff, that will help you to stay more consistent. That will help you to stay with it longer. It won't feel like as much of a drudgery. Because if you ever talk to somebody who does a podcasting, you ask them what their number one complaint is, and they all say, "Oh, it takes much more time than I thought it did."
Yeah.
Whereas if you work with someone like myself, you give over all the technical stuff, you save yourself so much time.
Where do you think people should start out, and what should they have figured out before they connect with someone like you that can help them kind of get moving along and getting shit done to to be to be very blunt.
I've had people come to me with all different levels of backgrounds and experiences. I was even just talking to a woman the other day who had this idea for a show, and we talked about the title, and I'm like, why is that in the title? And then we talked about it, and she realized, oh my God, you're right, because there was an extra little word in there that didn't need to be there that totally changed the intention behind the title of the podcast. And just by taking out that one word, totally made it focus on a thing. So, sometimes just having somebody like myself who has close to 15 years experience, I just see things that people miss otherwise. But I mean, I've coached people through helping them to define their target market. Who do they want their listeners to be? What to call their show? How does it fit in with the overall brand? I've worked with people through all of that. And I've also had people like, here's the name of my show. Here's my description. Here's everything. I'm ready to go. I was just looking for a platform and someone to produce it. So I don't want to say like you need to have everything up front. Of course, the more things you've figured out, the better it is. But I would say the most important thing is you just have to be in your business or doing what you're doing for a period of time so that you have some level of expertise. You have like some level of experience that you can share with people that they can benefit from. And you're not just, a kid out of college and you really don't have any much real world experience.
Two questions around formatting around podcasting. One is interview style versus just kind of solo talk. Do you have thoughts about, either of
It
those?
it really depends on what you're looking to do with your show and like what the intention is behind it. Because I've worked with people who have done a solo show. I've worked with single hosts. I've worked with multiple hosts. I think I've had as many as 3 co-hosts on a show. But like I had this gentleman, Monty. Monty Taylor, God rest his soul, who's a wonderful Jungian astrologer. He was great because he knew so much about the mythology behind the names of the planets and the archetypes. And he did a show around astrology that was so rich. And he would get into so much detail that you could really appreciate the art of astrology. He almost never had guests on. And his audience loved it because they loved him because he was so unique and he was so good at explaining the concepts and making it so rich and alive and vibrant. Some people, it's always about interviewing because, let's face it, talking for a half hour, an hour every week, it can be a bit tiring. You have to prepare for it. You have to know your stuff cold. Like me personally, I do kind of a combination. I actually, 3 weeks out of the month, I'm interviewing people, and normally, not always, I take 1 week out of the month and I just riff on a topic. And I
Mm,
only started doing that after, and again, we do live shows. We're a radio station as opposed to a podcasting network. So we do live shows. And what would happen is occasionally a host, like last minute, couldn't make it on the show. Like power went out in their house or whatever. But it's a live show. The show must go on. So then I wasn't prepared. So I just had to speak off the cuff, which I'm good at. And I have experience doing it for many years. And so I'd start doing these shows that were just off the cuff shows because the guest couldn't make it. And what I started seeing in the comments on the live streams, because I'd ask, I was like, do you guys like this? Is this okay? I mean, I know it's just me talking for an hour, but is it? And they say, yeah, we love it. These are our favorite kinds of shows. So
interesting.
because my audience told me they like it, after a few times, I said, okay, they like it enough. Let me do it on a regular basis. So then I would always take one show out of the month that would be just me and having my own voice.
And then, of course, you got the option of having a co-host, so a partner or spouse or
Absolutely.
friend or
Yep.
whatever. So I like that. Okay, now here, how about this? You've mentioned live, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so live versus audio, pre-recorded audio, versus live or pre-recorded video. I mean, audio. You in your world, you primarily focus on audio only, right? Do you don't?
No, we do for audio and video.
Oh, you do video. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
do. What do you use? Zoom or something like that to
Well,
to
we
connect?
use Zoom and we use a restreaming service so that we actually simulcast our videos to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Twitch.
Okay, so live versus pre-recorded, whether it's audio, video, or both. What's the advantages or disadvantages of that?
So, well, the obvious disadvantage is you have to set aside a time every week to do it. But personally, I feel like we're all kind of programmed from the time we're kids to expect a new episode to come out a
Yeah,
certain time every week. Um, but the advantage is when you're live streaming, you can see if people are commenting on the videos. Like I know every week I do my show, I have a handful of loyal listeners who are listening live and they're checking in. They sometimes post comments or questions. I always shout them out. It's always like, hey, there's Patty from Tucson. There's Sanaya from Georgia. There's William from Virginia. They're always saying something. And so by shouting them out, and if they ask a question, I'm going to take that question and ask it to my guest or I'm going to answer it. It builds loyalty. They're like, oh, he recognized me. Oh, it makes them feel good. That recognition, it builds loyalty and it builds engagement, which if you're doing something that's pre-recorded, you can't do that, right?
yeah,
Because you can reply to the comments after the fact, but you can't shout them out live in the actual show. So that's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in doing shows live each week.
kind of
Now,
hold your feet to the fire. Also, it becomes a
exactly.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, look, I mean, can you be live 100% of the time? Of course not. Things are always going to happen. You want to take a vacation, whatever, but you should be coming out with with new content every week. So you always record an extra episode or two, and then something happens, you can't make it. You just air that episode in your time slot. But there's something also about live. Like I also noticed it too. When I listen to a podcast, I can always tell whether it's pre-recorded, super polished, or it's live and more authentic. And there's something about recording something live that there's a certain energy to it that's just not there when you're pre-recording something and you can edit out the mistakes and if something happens, it can be dealt with in post-production. Whereas when you're live, whatever happens, happens.
Happens. It's the beauty of it right there. It's the realness of it. I got to
Right.
tell you, that's something I learned a long time ago, and especially when video started to become very prominent in the marketing space, recording videos for whatever, could be content videos, could be marketing, sales videos, or whatever. Here's the thing that I noticed is that the people that appeared to have the really perfect videos, right?
Mhm.
That were like no flaws, just said the exact words, probably teleprompter type thing, had less of a deep connection with their audience than the person that recorded the video that didn't take out all that stuff, right? That left it in there that was real. And I got curious about that. I did a little bit of research on that because I noticed that I personally would not connect with those super polished videos. I'd be like, it just feels too whatever. But the ones that were really just real. The people were real. They messed up every once in a while. And I'm like, yes, I love it because now I can relate to them, right? Um,
Exactly.
just had, just better results from whatever that they did. So um
And I believe that actually that's going to become more and more important in this era of AI.
yeah.
That now that AI can generate videos and do this and do that, it's the realness, it's the humanness, it's the authenticity of messing up once in a while that people are going to say, oh, like that's really Sam there on the video. Like this is really Sam. You can tell, like he just flubbed a word or something. Like I think that is going to become more and more precious as things do become more and more polished because of the way technology is going.
I would totally agree with you on that. Totally. Because I'm actually seeing that trend in another side of marketing. Email marketing has
Mm,
gotten to the point now where it just feels like it's the same old stuff, right? It's just
right.
that lands in our inbox, 100 or 500 times every single day. I started to get back into direct mail, actually literally mailing people something. And
Ah,
as opposed to sending them an email. And the results is significantly better in
yep.
that side because it's kind of this familiar, non-saturated, almost nostalgic, believe it or
Yeah.
not, nostalgic side of our lives that people will respond to.
But it's also the thought and the care that you take to actually do that because you have to get their address, their mailing address. You got to get an envelope, you got to print it out, you got to put a stamp on it, and you got to drop it at the post office sometime. So that's a lot of care and attention. And you can feel that. You can feel
Yeah,
that even if you don't know that for a fact.
yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Uh, Anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Sam? Just go into the chat and throw in your questions. We'd be happy to take some questions from any of you. Here we go. Here's a question. Uh, what if you don't edit the recording so it sounds naturally live?
Um, but if you know that you're not live, your energy is not going to be the same.
Hmm.
There's a certain like nervousness under the surface that no matter how good you are, it's always there when you're doing something live. So even if you're recording and you don't edit it out, there's still a difference in the energy.
Nice. I totally agree. That's it's not really the editing. It's the like you said, it's the energy.
Yeah.
Here's a couple more questions. What are some ways to find people to interview? It's a good question.
Well,
I got an answer for that
s-
too.
s- so and what I would say is look for who has a good following on social media. Look for who you connected with on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Look at who you admire, who you like, who would you like to learn from, and reach out to them and invite them, and just reach out to them directly through social media. If you don't get a response, go to their website, see if they have a contact form. And just be honest about it. Don't just do it. Oh, they've got 1 million followers, so let me have them on. No, but they have 1 million followers and you love their message. So you put in the message, hey, I love what you're about. I love this and that and the other thing. Like say something specific and so that they know that you really do know what they're talking about and invite them on. And you never know. Now, also be prepared. They may be booked out for a while. So don't reach out to somebody expecting them to say, yes, I can come on next week. Sometimes it can take months for people to have time to come on your show.
Interesting. Good point. Yeah, and also just get out there and start using the online networking, channels that are available. I mean, in Action Era, we have Collaborate, which is a live
Hmm.
event we do
Yep.
every 4 months where you get on and find people to be on your podcast. We've got Next Gen Collaboration Circle and Speakertunity, where you can list your podcast and you're looking for guests, and people will reach out to you. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways of doing that. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think it's really important to not be afraid to reach out to someone that you consider, a mentor or a high level leader, because it doesn't hurt to ask, and it can be very powerful when the yes comes in. So here's another question: what type of money can one get for selling their podcast and advertising on your podcast?
It depends on a lot of things. It
Mhm.
depends on how well defined is your niche. Is it a very unusual niche that someone's willing to pay a lot to get access to? Is it a small niche? Is it a big niche? And in the end, it all comes down to relationships. Everybody wants to know about sponsorships. How do I get sponsors? This and that. It comes down to the relationship you have with the company or the individual. And you need to cultivate that relationship before you ask for a sponsorship. And, there are some, and it's so different depending on the issue. It's like if I know what the show's about, if I know, all the details, how many listeners do you have, what's your social media, what's everything involved, can I give you advice on how you should price things? Yeah, probably. But answering that question in general, there are just too many variables.
Yeah, not to be corny and quote movie things, but you have to first build it so that they can come, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
and I think a lot of people start off with, well, the reason why I'm going to start a podcast is so that I can sell it later or sell advertising or
Mhm.
sponsors, and I can make all this money doing that. And they lose out on the focus of just starting the podcast, getting consistent at it, and building a following and building credibility in the niche or the industry that your podcast is directed, and then they'll start showing up. Honestly, I mean that's at least my experience in
Yeah,
other realms.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Which restreaming service do you recommend?
Restream.io is pretty good.
Restream.io. Okay, cool. Um, Larry wants to know, can you expand a little bit on the role of a podcast producer for a podcaster?
Well, different producers will offer different services. And a producer can be different than an editor, though sometimes producers do also take on the editing role. But a producer is the one in charge of making sure it sounds good, inserting like the intros and the outros, the artwork, making sure things are tagged properly, getting you up on the different services and getting it distributed out there. But everyone does things in a different way, and some people have sort of a la carte, like we can do this, and that for you, or we just do this, or we do everything. So it depends on the particular producer. From our point of view, I say we handle all the back end stuff for our hosts. So we handle promotions, production, distribution, and we provide analytics to our hosts so they see how they're doing each month. But that's us.
That's awesome. Do you have a low cost, or do you have a suggestion for a low cost video editor that will separate out the audio? I mean, pretty much almost any video editor does that nowadays.
Yeah,
Free.
most of them do. The AI video editor that I'm looking at that seems to be pretty good is Descript.
Yes, I've used Descript. It's really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's Descript dot AI or IO. It's either
Uh,
dot AI or dot IO.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's .ai, but I'm not sure.
yeah. AI, there's a dime a dozen out there nowadays for
Yeah,
AI that does this.
but they can
What?
get expensive if you do a lot of shows.
Yeah. What does better, video or audio podcasts, or is it
Um, well,
dependent
I
on?
want to be clear on terms because I see people misuse terms in our industry way too much. A podcast, technically speaking, is a pre-recorded audio file that's uploaded to a podcast platform. Anything else is different. A live stream could be audio or video live streamed. In general, what I see with the statistics with my network is we're seeing much more growth on the video live streams than we are on the audio side. The audio still the audio still brings in lots of listeners, but the growth I'm seeing is much more on the video side.
So technically, you're actually doing two things. You're doing a podcast, in the technical terms, it's a pre-recorded audio file that's uploaded to Apple and Spotify and all that sort of thing. But you're doing a kind of double whammy here. You're getting that audio by doing a live stream video broadcast.
Right, exactly. That's why we're talk radio, not podcast NYC. So
Yeah.
we're an internet radio station. So our first thing is the live stream. It's the live radio show that's then recorded and turned into a podcast. So we're podcasting on steroids.
Awesome. Love that. And I think that's where a lot of people end up going too.
Mhm.
Is there ever a time or stage in the growth process where you can start to charge people to be guests on your podcast? What are your thoughts on charging guests?
There are so many podcasts out there and there's so many places that somebody can guest on. In my experience, most people, if they hear there's a charge to be a guest, they'll be okay, thanks, but no thanks. However, there are exceptions. Like one time I had a gentleman on my show from Brazil who was out to spread the word about something politically happening at the time in Brazil and wanted to really educate people. And he had a budget and he was looking to sponsor a show to get on it. So I said, sure, I don't usually talk about this kind of thing, but if you want to sponsor that episode and come on, and we worked out an arrangement. But in general, I wouldn't look to ask for money from a guest unless you've really got a huge audience and you've got the exact audience that your guest wants to reach, and you know that your audience performs, meaning that if the guest talks about their book, they're going to go out and buy the book in droves, or if they're going to offer something that they're going to take advantage of it. But in general, I just wouldn't, because there's so many free opportunities. Why put yourself in the other person's shoes? Why would they pay you if they can go somewhere else?
Yeah, and I would add to that rather than charging someone to be a guest, what you do is that you work out in the arrangement of them being a guest, a promotion of your podcast to their community, because you can monetize that traffic so much better than and so much more than whatever charges you could charge the guest to
Yeah.
be on. That's how you scale your business. By the way. And before I ask you this last question, there's been a number of people in here that have been wanting to know how do they connect with you. And I know that you've got something, and I'll ask Becky to drop the link in here. What is she dropping a link to as a way to connect with you, Sam?
Well, to show my appreciation, to having the opportunity to speak to the audience, I normally charge for doing a discovery call. I usually charge about $250 for an hour of my time. And there's also an assessment. There's a link to doing an assessment with it. So the link you're going to get is an opportunity to schedule a time to speak with me for an hour about your show. It's discovery call. And when you click on the link, you'll see there's a link to do an assessment that'll ask you a whole bunch of questions that'll also help you to get real clear on lots of different aspects of your show. So it's you're getting a lot of value for free.
That's incredible. That's really a lot of value. So you actually get, if you go to the link that's in the chat now, just posted there by Becky, that's Sam's calendar link where you can actually book a
Hmm.
call, take that assessment. And if you want to know how you can work with Sam, Sam should meet with you to find out what you got going on for him to best figure out the best way that he could potentially support you. Oh, that link doesn't seem to be working. Let's try. Let's try that
Oh,
again.
that's interesting. Okay, wait a second.
Yeah, page not found. Okay.
Yep, one
Well,
second.
we'll get that fixed here. Give it a second.
I believe that is it. It was missing an L at the end.
Oh, just an extra L. There we go.
There you go.
That link that was just put in there is right. Okay, cool. So here's a question that someone's asking. If you're creating a podcast that has a limited number of episodes, let's say 30 or 40 episodes, that's intended to be an educational series, what is your
Mhm.
advice on how to market it? Is it any different than you would
Hmm.
market a regular podcast, especially if the episodes continue to be available to people?
I would say if they're designed to be educational, I would market it the same way you would market a free online course. You
Okay,
just
that's
you
good
want
advice.
to
Yeah.
present the value. What are you going to be talking about? And you just got to remember, why should they listen? Why should someone who's seeing some advertisement about this show, why should they tune in and listen? And especially if you know your target audience real well, and you can use their own language in it, that will attract them more than anything else.
That's a great suggestion. I don't know if that many of you know that in Action Era, well, my co-founder Iman Agai is the authority on online course building and online course creation.
Yeah.
Um, and this month we have an event called Action Course Mastery, which is all about teaching people how
Um,
to create these courses. And there's a mini course that leads up to the live Action Course Mastery live event. If you'd like to have some more information about Action Course Mastery to learn how to take example like this, episodes or content or clips or whatever from podcast or that sort of thing, and turn it into an actual course that you can monetize, reach out to Becky. I'll put Becky's email in here. Maybe my keyboard works. There we go. Becky at actionair.com. And Becky will get back to you with information and a link to go register for that course that's coming up. So
yeah,
great
I
idea.
highly recommend it as well. The stuff it's based on in Mind's ideas, they're just beautiful.
Someone's asking that the discovery calls no charge.
No charge.
No charge. Yeah, there you go. Pretty, that's hard to say no to. I mean, if you have any interest in either starting a podcast or building your existing podcast, I would get on this call in a heartbeat. So make sure you click on that link and register there.
And make sure to
Um,
take the assessment.
yeah, and take the assessment. Definitely take the assessment. That's always very important. Sam, before we kind of wrap up here, is there anything that you would like to leave everybody with in regards to, you know, what you do and how you, help and inspire business owners to reach more people and create more impact in the world?
Um, the one thing I just want to recommend to people to, if you're looking to work with a producer, anyone, doesn't matter, not me, anyone else, always check to see if they're going to give you statistics on how well your show is doing. I was shocked when I started to talk to people and I mentioned that we provide a statistics report every month of how many listeners the show is getting, at how many people were surprised at that, and how many people I've spoken to who worked with other networks never saw a single statistics report.
Mm.
And to me, it was just unfathomable. It's like if I'm paying you to get my show out there, I want to know that it's getting out there somehow, some way. Even if the numbers aren't super duper high, at least I know they're real numbers. So my one recommendation is when you're looking to work with a producer or a network, always make sure they're going to give you some kind of statistics report that's based on real stuff.
Okay, good advice. All right, well then that concludes our EIN training this week. Sam, you never disappoint, bud. You are awesome. I appreciate you. And looking forward to seeing you next time. Actually, I see you end of next month into San Diego, right?
Oh, wonderful. Yes, yes. I look forward to seeing you there.
Good. Thank you everybody for joining us on this EIN call. And again, Sam, thank you for being our guest in our words of wisdom here on podcasting. We do this every week, so we'll see you next week for our next training. So make sure you check that out, register for that when we release the information. And as far as where can you find the recording of this meeting? Becky, I think we have the EIN YouTube channel. Is that right? We also have the mobile app. If you go to the um, the Apple or Android App Store on your phone and you download Entrepreneurs International Network, so search for Entrepreneurs International Network, download that, and you should find the episode inside the app too. Becky also says that this recording will be sent out to everyone that registered for the event too. So you can find it on YouTube, you can find it on the app, and you're going to be notified with the direct link to it. So that's it. Thank you, Sam. Good to see you, bud. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a
Thank
great
you,
day.
Robert. Thank you so much.
Take care.